She found him dying in a river of his own blood, his royal armor shattered. For 3 days, the traveling Omega healer used every herb and prayer she knew to keep the nameless stranger alive. She never asked who he was. She never imagined the wounded wolf whose fevered gaze followed her every move was Lysander, the immortal Alpha King whose war had scarred the continent. And when his generals finally found their missing sovereign, his first command was not about his throne or his war. It was about her. She doesn't leave. Her name was Ilara, a wandering healer who believed her greatest purpose was mending broken wolves in the wild. His name was Lysander, a conqueror who believed his purpose was to break them. For 3 days, their worlds existed only in that remote cave, built on a lie of anonymity. But in the world of wolves, a king's imprint is an irrevocable law. And now, Ilara was bound to the most dangerous wolf alive, without even knowing his name. Ilara's world was one of quiet purpose and deliberate solitude. As an unbonded Omega with a rare healing gift, she moved between the remote villages of the Blackwood Wilds, offering her skills to wounded trackers, sick children, and birthing mothers. She asked for little: a meal, a night's shelter by a hearth. Packs made her nervous. Their hierarchies, their politics, their constant assessing glances at an unattached Omega felt like a cage. Her parents, both healers themselves, had been killed in a border skirmish when she was a child, leaving her with a deep mistrust of alphas and their endless wars. She preferred the deep woods, where the only laws were nature's. Her only companion was a faded memory and a small leather journal of medicinal notes her mother had left behind. That was how she found him. She was foraging for moonbell fungi near the rushing Cataract River when the scent hit her, not just blood, but the potent, metallic sting of alpha blood, laced with wolfsbane and grave dirt. It was the smell of a battlefield, but there was no battle for miles. Following the scent trail led her to a scene of carnage. 7 armored warriors, their insignias torn away, lay broken among the ferns. In the center, half submerged in the icy water, was a man. His armor was exquisite, dark steel engraved with a crest of a snarling wolf under a mountain peak, but it was shattered, pierced by what looked like silver-tipped claws. His face was pale as death beneath the grime and blood, his black hair fanned out in the current. But his chest still rose in shallow, ragged bursts. Every instinct told her to run. A wounded alpha was the most volatile, dangerous creature in the woods. To approach was to invite a death strike. But her healer's oath, the one she'd whispered over her parents' graves, screamed louder. She waded into the river, the cold stealing her breath, and dragged his massive, unconscious form onto the bank. Getting him to shelter was a 3-hour ordeal of sheer will. She used her cloak as a drag sled, inching him up the forest slope to a dry, shallow cave she used sometimes. He was burning with fever by the time she got a fire going. The wounds were catastrophic. A deep gash across his ribs, another on his thigh, both poisoned by something dark that resisted her initial poultices. His left arm was broken. For the first day, she was sure he would die. She didn't sleep. She crushed herbs, boiled water, and sang the old healing songs her mother taught her, channeling her Omega energy into the wounds. On the second day, the fever broke for an hour. His eyes fluttered open. They were startling, storm cloud gray, blurred with pain but intensely aware. He didn't speak, just watched her as she worked, his gaze tracking her every movement around the small cave with a focus that was unnerving. When she brought a cup of willowbark tea to his lips, his large, calloused hand came up, not to take the cup, but to wrap weakly around her wrist. His touch sent a jolt through her, not of fear, but of something else, a resonant hum in her blood. "Who?" he rasped, his voice ruined. "No one," Ilara said softly, pulling her wrist free. "Just a healer, drink." He obeyed, his eyes never leaving her face. He fell back into a fitful sleep, murmuring words in an old dialect she didn't know. Words that sounded like orders and names, and once, a gut-wrenching cry of "hold the line." On the third day, he was stronger. He could sit up, leaning against the cave wall. He still hadn't told her his name, and she hadn't asked. In her experience, names came with titles, and titles came with expectations. Here, he was just a wounded wolf. She was just a healer. But the dynamic had shifted. His silence was no longer the silence of weakness. It was the quiet of a predator observing. He watched her grind herbs, his nostrils flaring as he committed her scent to memory: vanilla, pine sap, and the green smell of crushed leaves. When she changed his bandages, his jaw would tighten, but not from pain, from the effort of absolute stillness. That afternoon, she found him studying her open journal, which she'd left beside her bedroll. His finger was tracing a sketched map of the region. "You travel alone," he stated. It wasn't a question. "It's safer," Ilara replied, taking the journal back. A grim, almost imperceptible smile touched his cracked lips. "Nowhere is safe, little healer." That night the dream came to her, a shared dream, vivid and terrifying. She was running on 2 legs, then 4, through a burning forest, the taste of ash and rage in her mouth. At her side ran a massive, shadow-black wolf with grey eyes. A crown of twisted iron and obsidian sat upon its head. They were not fleeing, they were hunting. She woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. Across the fire, his eyes were open, glowing faintly in the dark. He had seen it too. The first thread of the bond had been spun, and neither of them could break it. The next morning, the forest outside went silent. No birdsong, no chattering squirrels. Ilara felt it first, a pressure in the air, the subtle vibration of dozens of powerful wolves moving in unison. She peered out from the cave mouth and froze. The tree line was filled with warriors. They wore polished black armor emblazoned with the same mountain wolf crest, and they moved with a lethal, disciplined grace she had never seen. At their forefront were 2 massive men, one with a scar across his face, the other with eyes like flint. They had found him. Ilara stumbled back into the cave. "They're here," she whispered, "a war party with your crest." The stranger, the king, didn't look surprised. He slowly, painfully got to his feet. For the first time, she saw him not as a patient, but as a sovereign. Even battered and shirtless, he seemed to fill the cave with a regal, terrifying authority. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice no longer a rasp but a clear, low order. He walked out of the cave, and Ilara, against her better judgment, followed, hovering in the entrance. The moment the scarred general saw him, he dropped to one knee, his head bowed. The entire war party followed, a wave of submission rippling through the trees. "My king," the general breathed, his voice thick with relief. "We have searched for 3 days. We feared the worst." "The worst was avoided, Kale," Lysander said, his voice carrying easily. "Stand." As the generals rose, their eyes immediately snapped to Ilara. She saw the shock, the confusion, and then the slow, dawning understanding as they scented the air. The cave smelled of 2 wolves now, their essences intertwined from days of close proximity, and overlaying it all was the new, unmistakable signature of a fresh, powerful imprint. The flint-eyed general, whose name was Vor, took a step forward, his gaze locked on her. "Sire, you're sent, and the Omegas, it's bound." Lysander didn't deny it. He didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on his generals, his posture one of absolute command. "This healer saved your king's life. She pulled me from the river and bore my weight. She has tended to me with skill and compassion." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he issued the decree that would shatter Ilara's world. "She is under my protection. She returns with us to Stonehold. She does not leave." The words were not a request, not an invitation. They were a foundational law laid down by the Alpha King. General Kale's eyes widened. Vor's face went carefully blank. Ilara felt the cave floor tilt beneath her. "Lysander, wait," she said, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. He finally turned to look at her, and the intensity in his storm-gray eyes was a physical force. "I can't, I have a life. My rounds, the villages that need me." "They will find another healer," he said, and though his tone was final, there was something in his gaze, a possessiveness, yes, but beneath it, a raw, unspoken need that mirrored the bond humming in her own chest. "Your life is here now, with me." He turned back to his men. "Prepare a litter. We leave for the capital within the hour." As the generals sprang into action, Lysander finally closed the distance between himself and Ilara. He stood so close she could feel the heat from his body. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. "You asked for no name, little healer, but you earned every right to mine. I am Lysander of the House of Stone, Alpha King of the Northern Realms. And you," he said, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fleeting second, "are coming home." The journey was a blur of silent warriors, murmured respect, and the overwhelming reality of her situation. They placed her on a horse beside the king's litter. She was given a thick, fur-lined cloak that smelled of him. No one spoke to her directly, but she felt their stares, heard their whispered speculations. The king's Omega, the healer from the wilds, imprinted. Stonehold was not what she expected. It wasn't a rustic fortress, but a sprawling modern citadel built into the side of a mountain, all sharp angles, dark glass, and soaring towers. It hummed with power, wealth, and military precision. As their procession passed through the massive gates, hundreds of pack members lined the streets, bowing as their king returned. But their eyes, full of curiosity and shock, were all on her, the unknown Omega in traveling clothes, riding at the king's side. They were ushered into a vast, echoing throne room. An older woman with silver hair and a severe expression, introduced as Marlo, the seneschal, approached. She bowed to Lysander, then turned a critical, appraising eye on Ilara. "The council is assembled and agitated, sire," Marlo said. "They demand an audience regarding the succession, the war with the Eastern Claw," and her eyes flicked to Ilara again, the new development. Lysander's expression turned to ice. "The council can wait. Have chambers prepared in the royal wing, the ones adjoining mine. Ilara is fatigued from the journey." Marlo's eyebrows shot up. Adjoining chambers, for an unbonded, unmated Omega, it was a scandalous declaration of intent. "At once, my king." As Marlo hurried off, Lysander led Ilara up a grand staircase, away from the prying eyes. The room she was given took her breath away. It was larger than any 5 village huts combined, with a roaring fireplace, shelves of books, and a window overlooking the entire snow-capped mountain range. It was also undeniably connected to his through a single, heavy oak door. He turned to her in the center of the room. The authority of the throne room fell away, leaving just the man from the cave, though his power was still a tangible cloak around him. "This is your home now," he said, his voice gentler. "You are safe here." "Safe," Ilara echoed, finding her voice at last. "I am a prisoner in a gilded cage. You cannot just decrease someone's life, Lysander. That imprint, it happened in a fever dream. You don't know me, I don't know you." "I know you saved me when you should have run," he said, stepping closer. "I know your scent is the only thing that quells the battle rage in my blood. I know that for 3 days, you were the only truth in a world of lies and pain. That is enough for me." He reached out, his fingers just barely brushing a strand of hair from her face. The contact sent that same electric hum through her. "It will have to be enough for you for now." He left her then, the door clicking shut softly behind him. Ilara stood alone in the cavernous, beautiful room, the weight of the mountain and the king's will pressing down on her. She walked to the window, looking out at the fierce, unforgiving landscape. This was his world, a world of stone, iron, and absolute command. And downstairs, a council of the most powerful alphas in the realm was waiting, already plotting how to break the king's mysterious new obsession, and the Omega who threatened all their carefully laid plans. The council did not wait. As Ilara stared at the mountains, 7 of the realm's most powerful alphas were seated around a black obsidian table in the war room below, their fury a contained storm. They had not fought, bled, and schemed to see their king's legacy tied to a nameless, packless Omega healer found in the dirt. Lord Cedric, whose lands bordered the Eastern Claw, slammed a fist on the table. "An imprint, in a cave, with a asterisk wandering asterisk Omega. It is a fever dream, not a binding. She is a stray he picked up along the road. We must annul this before the other kingdoms hear of it and think us weak." General Vore, who had been at the cave, spoke with icy calm. "You did not smell what I smelled, Cedric. The bond is fresh, but it is real. It settled over them like a second skin. The king's aura is stabilized, for the first time in years." "Stabilized or addled?" snapped Lady Anya, the sharp-tongued alpha who controlled the northern silver mines. "He was wounded, poisoned, vulnerable. This is predatory instinct, not destiny. He sees a fragile thing that nursed him and his beast has claimed it. We must present him with a proper choice. A royal Omega from a strong bloodline. Once he's clear-headed, he'll see reason." Seneschal Marlo cleared her throat. "He has given a royal decree. She does not leave. You are not discussing a dalliance. You are discussing defying the king's direct order regarding his imprinted mate." The room fell silent. Defying Lysander was a quick path to an early grave. Lord Cedric leaned forward, a new strategy gleaming in his eyes. Then we do not defy him. We test her asterisk. If she is truly meant to be our queen, let her prove it. The solstice gathering is in 6 days. Every allied and rival alpha will be there. Let her stand beside him. Let the court see her. The pressure will break a village healer. She will flee or she will fall. And the king's infatuation will die a natural death. Upstairs, Ilara knew none of this. She only knew the suffocating silence of the opulent room. She paced, her healer's senses overwhelmed by the scent of lemon oil, stone, and the lingering trace of Lysander's mahogany and snow scent from the cloak. It was a beautiful prison. Her fingers itched for the feel of soil, for the sound of a forest stream. A soft knock came at the main door, not the one connecting to Lysander's rooms. It was a young Beta maid with kind eyes, carrying a tray of food. "I'm Faye, my lady. The king thought you might be hungry." Ilara nearly laughed at the title. "Thank you, Faye, and it's just Ilara." The maid set the tray down, glancing nervously at the connecting door. "The whole citadel is talking, you know. They say you saved the king's life. They say he hasn't stopped a war just to get home to someone since, well, ever." "Stopped a war?" Ilara asked, curiosity cutting through her anxiety. Faye's eyes widened. "You do know, the attack on him, it was an ambush by the Eastern Claw. He was surveying the front lines. The king was in the middle of planning a final, brutal campaign to crush them for good. But when he went missing, everything halted. General Kale recalled the advanced legions. They thought him dead." The maid lowered her voice. "Some on the council were not entirely disappointed. War is expensive. But now he's back, and with you," she trailed off, realizing she'd said too much. She curtsied and hurried out. Ilara's appetite vanished. Lysander wasn't just a king, he was a war king, and his sudden disappearance had paused a machine of death. And now his return, with a mysterious Omega in tow, had just thrown a wrench into that machine's gears. She was not just a complication, she was a political seismic event. She didn't see Lysander again until nightfall. The connecting door opened, and he entered, having changed into dark, simple trousers and a tunic. He looked more like the man from the cave, though the authority was now inherent, not forced by circumstance. "You should eat," he said, nodding to the untouched tray. "I'm not hungry for food, I'm hungry for answers," Ilara replied, crossing her arms. "You paused a war because you were missing." His gaze sharpened. "Who told you that? Does it matter? Is it true?" Lysander sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, the Eastern Claw has been raiding our borders for 2 years, poisoning wells, burning villages. I was done negotiating. The ambush was a targeted strike. They knew where I'd be." He looked at her, his gray eyes serious. "My survival changes things. My return with you changes everything." "Because I'm a distraction," Ilara stated flatly. "Because you are a asterisk variable asterisk," he corrected, stepping closer. "For 3 years, I have been only the king, only the general. My will was the will of the realm. Now my will is divided. It must also consider you. The council, our allies, our enemies, they all see that. They see a potential weakness or a new kind of strength. They are trying to decide which." "And what do you see?" she whispered. He was silent for a long moment. "I see the only person who has looked at me and not seen a throne in 3 years." The raw honesty in his words disarmed her. The bond between them hummed, a low, insistent pull. She wanted to resent him, to hate this captivity, but her traitorous heart ached for the loneliness in his admission. The next days were a whirlwind of silent observation and simmering tension. Ilara was given the freedom of the royal wing, always shadowed by a discreet guard, Kale, the scarred general, who was kind but unwavering. She learned the citadel's rhythms. She saw the way the courtiers looked at her, with curiosity, disdain, and sometimes pity. She also saw the pressure Lysander was under. Through half-open doors, she heard the raised voices from his study. "The Eastern Claw is regrouping, sire. Your hesitation is costing lives. The tribute from the Silver Peaks is late. They test your focus. The succession must be secured. A royal mating must be formalized." Every demand was a brick on his shoulders, and she was the perceived cause of his hesitation. On the 4th day, Marlowe came to her with a team of tailors and a grim expression. The solstice gathering is in 2 days, my lady. You will need appropriate attire. The fitting was an ordeal of pins, silks, and measuring tapes. The dresses they brought were extravagant, constricting. Ilara felt like a doll being dressed for a sacrifice. I have my own clothes, she protested, holding up her simple, travel-worn tunic. Marlowe's lips thinned. Those are not the clothes of a king's consort. You must look the part, even if you do not yet know it. That night the dream returned. This time it was clearer. She was the Black Wolf with Lysander, but they were not hunting animals. They were hunting men, soldiers with the insignia of a clawed hand. They fought back to back, a perfect, lethal dance. She woke not with a gasp, but with a deep, resonant understanding in her bones. The bond wasn't just emotional. It was merging their instincts, their skills. Her healer's mind was learning the patterns of his warrior's heart. She went to the connecting door and knocked. He opened it immediately, as if he'd been waiting. He was shirtless, a fresh bandage on his ribs where the deepest wound was still healing. The sight of it, the memory of treating it, made something protective and fierce surge in her. The dream, she said, the Eastern Claw soldiers, their formation, they leave their left flank open when they retreat. It's a feint. They have archers in the trees on the left. Lysander stared at her, shock stripping his face of all its careful control. That was a specific, tactical weakness. His scouts had only confirmed the week before the ambush. Information no village healer could possibly know. The bond was sharing more than emotion. It was sharing memory, knowledge. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. The connection flared, bright and hot. "What are you doing to me?" he murmured, not in accusation, but in awe. "You're doing it to both of us," she breathed. The solstice gathering arrived like a storm. The great hall of Stonehold was transformed, filled with the glittering, powerful elite of a dozen allied packs and a few wary emissaries from neutral territories. Ilara stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand on Lysander's offered arm. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, her hair braided with subtle silver threads. She looked every inch a queen, and she felt like an imposter. A hush fell as they descended. Hundreds of eyes judged her. She felt the weight of their stares, heard the whispers that slithered through the music. No pack mark, smells of forest and peasant, how long before she cracks? Lysander's hand over hers was firm, his aura a solid wall of dominance beside her. He introduced her to a blur of faces, Alpha this, Lady that. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. The test, as Lord Cedric had planned, had begun. It was Lady Anya who struck the first public blow. During a toast, she raised her glass, her voice syrupy sweet. "To our king's remarkable recovery, and to the asterisk simple charms of the wilderness that soothed him. Tell us, dear, what was the most challenging part of tending to His Majesty? Was it the blood or the lack of proper facilities?" The jab was clear, meant to highlight her lowly origins. A titter ran through the crowd nearest to them. Lysander's grip tightened, his jaw clenching, but before he could speak, Ilara did. She smiled, a gentle, genuine smile she used to calm frightened patients. The most challenging part, Lady Anya, was the wolfsbane poison woven with bloodroot. It required a precise counterpoultice of powdered moonbell and dawn-drenched spider silk. The facilities were a cave, yes, but the ingredients, they grow only in clean, wild places, untouched by ambition or silver mine runoff. Perhaps I could show your own healers the recipe. It's very effective for toxin purification. The tittering stopped. Lady Anya's smile froze. Ilara had not defended herself. She had demonstrated expertise and subtly insulted the industrial pollution of Anya's mines. A few alphas nodded, impressed. Lysander looked down at her, a spark of fierce pride in his eyes. But Cedric was not done. As the night wore on, he orchestrated a subtler attack. A young, breathtakingly beautiful Omega from a powerful coastal pack was spontaneously called to perform a traditional dance. She moved with hypnotic grace, her eyes frequently seeking Lysander's, her scent, jasmine and sea salt wafting through the air. It was a display of a proper Omega, cultured, connected, and politically valuable. Ilara felt a stab of insecurity so sharp it was physical. This was what they wanted for him. This made sense. She was a weed in a cultivated garden. She tried to pull her hand away, but Lysander held it fast. He didn't even watch the dancer. He leaned down, his lips brushing Ilara's ear. I have seen 1,000 such dances, he murmured, his breath warm. I have only once seen a woman drag a king from a river using her cloak as a sled. There is no comparison. The warmth of his words battled her cold dread. The test was not over. It came to a head when an emissary from a neutral pack, a grizzled old alpha named Borin, approached. He bowed to Lysander, then turned his keen gaze on Ilara. A healer, they say, my granddaughter is sick. Our healers cannot name the fever. Her skin is hot, her eyes see things that are not there. What would you do? It was a public examination, a challenge to her claimed skill. The hall watched, waiting for her to stumble. Ilara's mind raced, then settled. She thought of her mother's journal, of a similar case described from the southern marshes. Does she complain of a metallic taste in her mouth? Ilara asked. And are there red, twin-pronged flowers near your water source? Devil's kiss, we call them. Borin's eyes widened. Yes, to both. It's not a fever, it's a poisoning. The pollen is carried by the evening mist. Make a tea from the roots of the very same flower, boiled twice to remove the toxin, and she will improve within a day, but move her bedchamber away from the water. The old alpha stared at her for a long moment, then bowed again, deeper this time. Thank you, healer, he turned to Lysander. Your mate has a keen eye and a keen mind, King Lysander, you are fortunate. A ripple of genuine respect followed Borin's retreat. Ilara had passed a crucial test, not of politics, but of essential worth. She saw Cedric's face darken. His plan was failing. The final blow came from an unexpected direction. As the gathering was winding down, a commotion erupted at the hall's entrance. A bloodied, exhausted scout stumbled in, supported by 2 guards. He fell to his knees before Lysander. Sire, news from the front. The Eastern Claw, they didn't regroup. They split. A small force harasses the border fort, but the main army, they vanished. Our scouts are blind. They're gone. The hall erupted in worried shouts. A vanished army was a terrifying prospect. They could be anywhere, preparing a strike at the heart of the realm. Lysander's face became a mask of cold strategy. How many days since last sighting? 4, sire. 4 days, an army could move far in 4 days. Lysander's gaze swept his council. We need eyes, now. It was then that Ilara, still riding the adrenaline of the night, felt a strange, nagging pull. It was the bond, but it was pulling her attention not to Lysander, but outward toward the east. The shared dream flashed in her mind, the trees, the terrain. A certainty, calm and clear, settled over her. She spoke, and her voice, though quiet, cut through the panic. They're not coming for the fort or for the capital directly. All eyes turned to her. Lysander looked at her, intense and questioning. They're in the Deadwood Pass, Ilara said, the words coming as if from a memory not her own. The terrain matches the dream. It's a bottleneck. They're waiting, not for an army, for a supply convoy, the one carrying the season's silver from Lady Anya's mines to the royal treasury. It's due through the pass in 2 days. Cut that off, and you cut the pay for half your legions. A stunned silence gripped the hall. The route of the silver convoy was a closely guarded secret. Only the council, the king, and the mine masters knew it. Lysander's eyes locked with hers, seeing not just his mate, but a strategic oracle the bond had created. Then his gaze swept to his council, his expression turning arctic. The Eastern Claw had known where to ambush him. Now they knew the route of a secret convoy. The implication was horrifying and clear. There was a traitor in Stonehold, in this very room. The solstice gathering was forgotten. The test of the Omega Healer was over. A new, more dangerous game had begun. Lysander's command echoed in the suddenly silent hall, his voice dripping with lethal promise. Secure this hall, no one leaves, we have a viper to find. The great hall became a gilded cage. Lysander's order echoed off the stone, and the massive doors were sealed by stone-faced guards. Panic, sharp and sour, spiked the air. The glittering guests were now suspects, and the traitor was among them, wearing the face of an ally. Lysander stood before the assembled crowd, his earlier conviviality burned away by a cold, lethal focus. The route of the Silver Conv was known to 12 individuals in this realm. 8 of them are in this room. The Eastern Claw has that information. Therefore, one of you is a viper, or you shelter one." Lord Cedric was the first to splutter. "This is an outrage, to be accused by the intuition of a wild Omega. She names a pass, and you see treason. This is how she divides us. This is her strategy." General Kale stepped forward, his scarred face grim. "The scouts' report confirms the main enemy force has vanished. The Deadwood Pass is a logical ambush point for that convoy. The tactical assessment is sound, regardless of the source." "The source is the issue," Lady Anya snapped, her eyes flashing to Elara with undisguised hatred. "She speaks of shared dreams, of knowing things she cannot know. This is not a bond, this is an infection. She has clouded the king's mind, and now she sows paranoia to weaken his counsel." Elara felt the accusation like a physical blow, but she also felt the bond thrum with Lysander's rising anger, a protective wave that crashed against her own fear. She didn't need to defend herself. Lysander did it for her. "She saved your king," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "She identified a poison your own healers missed. She provided a tactical insight that, if true, saves our economy and prevents a massacre. Her value is proven. Your loyalty, however, is now in question." He turned to General Vore. "Separate the 8. Take them to the secure chambers adjacent to the war room. I will speak with each." As Vore began directing guards, a new voice cut through the tension. It was Marlowe, the seneschal, she had been quietly observing from the edge of the dais. "Sire, if I may, the security of the convoy route is not merely a matter of spoken words. It is documented on a single, encrypted scroll within the royal archives. The cipher changes weekly. To communicate the route accurately to an enemy, one would need both the scroll's location and the current cipher." The room stilled. That narrowed the field dramatically. "Who has access to the archive and the cipher log?" Lysander asked, though his eyes were already scanning the 8 suspects with new calculation. Marlowe's gaze was impassive. "Myself, General Kale as head of military logistics, Lord Cedric as treasurer, Lady Anya as the silver's originator, and of course, yourself, my king." 5 people, not 8. The traitor was in an even tighter circle. The revelation sent a new, more intimate wave of shock through the hall. The betrayal wasn't from a minor functionary, it was from the innermost sanctum of power. Lysander looked at the 4 named individuals, his seneschal, his general, his treasurer, and his mining magnate. One of them had sold him to the Eastern Claw. "Search the archives," Lysander commanded. "Now, check the scroll seal and the cipher log for tampering." As Kale and a team of guards hurried off, the interrogation began in earnest. One by one, the 5 were taken to a side chamber. Lysander conducted the sessions, but he insisted Elara remain with him, seated slightly behind his chair. "The bond," he told her quietly. "Tell me what you feel, not what they say, what they feel asterisk." The first was General Kale, who had just returned from the archive search. His report was grim. "The scroll's case was opened, sire. The wax seal was carefully melted and reset. The cipher log showed a page had been pressed upon, as if copied. It was done with skill, but it was done." Kale's anger and shame were a hot, honest blaze in Elara's senses. He felt his security had been breached, his honor stained. She leaned forward and whispered to Lysander, "He's angry, at the betrayal and at himself. There's no guilt, only failure." Lysander dismissed Kale, with orders to double the guard on the archives. Next was Marlowe. Her emotions were a complex, tightly woven tapestry, concern, deep loyalty, but beneath it, a thread of profound personal fear. Not fear of discovery, Elara sensed, but fear for Lysander. When questioned, Marlowe was succinct. "I have served your house for 40 years, since you were a child. My loyalty is to the stone. If I wished you harm, you would never have left your crib." Elara whispered, "She is afraid for you, not of you." Lady Anya was a storm of resentful pride and seething ambition. She denied everything, of course, but the emotional signature was muddled. The ambition was clear, but was there guilt? Elara struggled to separate the woman's general contempt from specific treachery. "She hates me, she wants power, but I can't feel the treason, just avarice." Then came Lord Cedric. The moment he entered the room, Elara felt it. A slick, cold layer of deception laid over a core of frantic, calculating fear. It was different from Anya's hot anger. This was cold and slippery. As Lysander questioned him about treasury discrepancies that could fund hidden communications, Cedric's answers were smooth, too smooth. He cited complex economic factors, blamed market fluctuations. Ilara's hand tightened on the back of Lysander's chair. She closed her eyes, focusing on the bond, on the emotional residue Cedric left in the air. Beneath the polished words, she felt the sharp spike of panic when Lysander mentioned a specific, hidden account code. It was a flash, quickly buried, but it was there. "He's lying," Ilara murmured, so softly only Lysander could hear. "When you said account 7-alpha, he felt like a rabbit seeing a hawk." Lysander's eyes never left Cedric's face. He asked no more questions. He simply said, "You are dismissed to the antechamber, Cedric. Do not speak to anyone." When the door closed, Lysander turned to Ilara. "You're certain?" "The bond is certain," she said, her own heart racing. The emotion was pure, undiluted fear of discovery. Before they could call in the last person, a frantic knock came at the door. It was Faye, the maid, her face pale. She bobbed a curtsy, her eyes wide with terror. "My king, my lady, I didn't know who else to tell. I was cleaning the council antechamber after the last meeting. I found this, caught under the leg of Lord Cedric's usual chair." She held out a small, crumpled piece of parchment. It wasn't the official scroll. It was a private note, written in a tight, efficient script. It read, "Conv route confirmed. Deadwood Pass, dawn 2 days hence. Payment in gemstones as agreed. End this before the Omega consolidates power." It was not signed, but it didn't need to be. The paper was of a rare, flax-based stock imported from the coastal marshes, the same stock used in Lord Cedric's personal ledgers. Lysander took the note, his face a mask of frozen fury. "Where is Cedric now?" "In the antechamber with the others, sire," Vor said from the doorway. "Bring him now." But when Vor returned a minute later, his expression was alarmed. "He's gone, sire. The antechamber guard," he said. Cedric complained of chest pains, asked to go to the infirmary. The guard escorted him to the door, but Cedric insisted on walking the last steps alone to preserve his dignity. He never arrived. Cedric had fled, guilt confirmed. Lysander erupted into motion. "Lock down the citadel, find him, he cannot have gotten far." But as the alarms began to sound, a worse truth dawned. Cedric's flight was not just an admission of guilt, it was a signal. He had been caught, which meant his part of the plan had failed, and a cornered traitor with nothing to lose is the most dangerous kind. Ilara felt the realization through the bond a second before Lysander voiced it. "The convoy," they said in unison. Cedric wouldn't just run, he would try to salvage his value to the Eastern Claw. He would send a warning that the ambush was compromised. If the convoy changed route, the Eastern Claw would know their source was burned. But if they acted immediately tonight instead of in 2 days. Lysander was already striding toward the war room, Ilara and his generals at his heels. "Get a Swiftwing to the convoy commander, change the route, have them bypass the Deadwood Pass entirely, take the longer southern track." "It's too late, sire," Kale said, his face ashen as he calculated. The convoy entered the pass foothills at dusk. To send a rider now, he would never reach them in time. A Swiftwing could, but in the darkness, over mountainous terrain. "Then we mobilize a rescue force," Lysander growled, slamming his hands on the war table map. "We ride for the Deadwood Pass, now." "The pass is a day's hard ride away for a small, fast group," General Vor stated. "A full legion would take 2. The convoy will be attacked at dawn. We cannot get there in time to stop the ambush." A helpless, furious silence filled the room. They could warn, but they could not protect. Hundreds of guards and drivers, and a fortune in silver, would be slaughtered. It was Ilara who broke the silence. Her eyes were on the map, but she was seeing the dream terrain again, feeling the bond pull at her awareness. "You can't get a legion there in time, but you don't need a legion to stop an ambush." All eyes turned to her. "You need to change the battlefield," she said, her finger tracing a different path on the map. "Here, the Gorgon's throat. It's a narrow canyon halfway through the pass. If the convoy could be sped up just slightly, they would reach this point by first light instead of the wider ambush zone. And if a small elite force, say 20 of your best, were already hidden in the rocks above the throat, when the Eastern Claw pursues the convoy into that choke point. She didn't need to finish. Lysander saw it, a classic pincer reversal. Let the enemy commit to the chase, then trap them in a kill box from above. It was risky. It required perfect timing. It required the convoy to play bait. It also requires the conv to know the plan, Kale said. We cannot get a message to them. We don't need to, Ilara said, a strange calm settling over her. She looked at Lysander. You need to get yourself to the Gorgon's throat. With your 20 best, I can get a message to the conv. How? Lysander asked, his gaze intense. The bond, she said simply. It shares memories, knowledge. If I focus on you on the plan, and you get close enough to the convoy commander, you're an alpha, a powerful one. You could project the plan, push it into his mind as an instinct, a gut feeling. He'll think it's his own tactical insight. He'll speed up. He'll choose the throat. The room was stunned. Using the mate bond as a tactical communication network was unheard of. The risks were enormous. The mental strain, the potential for the connection to shatter under the pressure, leaving both of them catatonic. No, Lysander said immediately, it's too dangerous for you. It's more dangerous to do nothing, Ilara shot back, stepping closer to him. You said I was a variable, a new kind of strength. This is it. This is what our bond can do. Let me help you save your people. The silence stretched. Lysander searched her face, seeing not the fragile healer he'd found, but the resilient, fierce partner fate had given him. He gave a single sharp nod. Vor select 19, the ghost unit. We leave in 10 minutes. Kale, you hold Stonehold. Find Cedric, Marlowe, keep the council contained. No one leaves, no messages go out. He turned back to Ilara, taking her hands. His were warm, steady. What do you need? A quiet place. And you need to think of the plan, of the map, of the throat. Visualize it. When you're within a few miles of the convoy, push that image, that intention toward me. I'll be here holding the connection. I'll amplify it, send it back toward you, toward the commander. It will be like aiming a beacon. He pulled her into a swift, hard kiss, a promise and a prayer. Then he was gone, a whirlwind of preparation. Ilara was taken to Lysander's private chambers, the heart of his power. She sat on the edge of his bed, closed her eyes, and did the hardest work of her life. She wasn't healing a body, she was holding open a channel between two minds across dozens of miles. She felt him leave the citadel, a pinpoint of fierce focus moving away from her. She held the thread of the bond, fragile as a spider's silk, but humming with potent energy. Hours passed, the night deepened. She felt his fatigue, the strain of the hard ride. She felt his unwavering focus on the map in his mind, the Gorgon's throat, the placement of his men, the need for speed. As the first hints of dawn tinged the sky, she felt him grow closer to the convoy's last known position. She felt his mind reach out, not to her, but through her, a projectile of pure intent. Ilara gasped, her back arching as the plan flooded her, not in words, in images, in imperatives. Speed, throat, ambush the ambushers. She grabbed the mental projection, and with all the will she possessed, she pushed it back along the bond, aiming it like an arrow at the distant, unaware mind of the convoy commander. In the Deadwood Pass, Commander Hale jerked in his saddle. A sudden, inexplicable certainty seized him. The wider path ahead felt wrong, death waited there, but the narrower, trickier Gorgon's throat, it felt like safety, like high ground. He didn't question it. He barked orders. Pick up the pace. I want us through the Gorgon's throat before the sun fully clears the ridge. Move. The convoy lurched into a risky, faster pace. On the cliffs above the wider pass, the Eastern Claw archers waited, confused. Their prey was accelerating off script. Their commander, realizing the plan was compromised, made a fateful decision. After them, don't let them escape the pass, we take them in the narrows. The Claw forces abandoned their perfect ambush site and poured into the canyon in pursuit. They funneled right into the Gorgon's throat. Lysander, hidden above with his 19 ghosts, watched the enemy flood into the kill zone. He didn't smile. He simply raised his hand and dropped it. Hell rained down from the cliffs. Not arrows first, but boulders, loosened from their perches, crashing down to seal the canyon's exit. Then the arrows, precise and merciless. The Eastern Claw soldiers, trapped in the narrow space, were cut to pieces. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Back in Stonehold, Ilara felt the shift in the bond, the swift, brutal release of tension, the cold satisfaction of a threat eliminated. She slumped forward, exhausted but euphoric. It had worked. But her relief was short-lived. The door to the chamber burst open. It was not a friend. It was Lady Anya, her fine gown torn, her hair disheveled, and she was not alone. Two hulking guards loyal to her house held a struggling, gagged Fae between them. "You," Anya spat, her eyes wild. "You and your bond, you've ruined everything." Ilara scrambled to her feet, her energy spent. "Anya, what are you doing?" Cedric was a fool, a greedy, short-sighted fool, but he was useful, Anya hissed, advancing. His job was to keep the king distracted with war, draining the treasury into military contracts that lined our pockets. My job was to steer him toward a proper political mating with my niece. We were so close. Then you astray from the woods, you imprint, you give him clarity instead of chaos, you uncover our source of income. It all clicked. Anya wasn't just against Ilara out of snobbery. She was against her because Ilara's presence and the stabilizing bond threatened a vast, corrupt scheme. Cedric's treason with the Eastern Claw was just one facet of a deeper rot. "The king is returning. He'll know," Ilara said, backing toward the connecting door to her own room. "He'll return to find his precious mate has tragically fled," Anya said, a cruel smile on her face. Overwhelmed by the court, heartbroken, she ran back to the wilds. "A tragic, believable end, and this meddling maid will be found with your belongings, executed for helping you escape." She nodded to her guards. "Take her to the northern postern gate. The cliff path is treacherous in the dark. Accidents happen." The guards lunged. Ilara tried to fight, but she was drained, and they were full-grown alphas. One clamped a hand over her mouth, the other pinned her arms. As they dragged her toward the servants' passage, Ilara did the only thing she could. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She threw every ounce of her fear, her location, and Anya's snarling face down the bond to Lysander in one raw, blinding surge of panic. Then a heavy cloak was thrown over her head, and the world went dark. The panic Ilara threw down the bond was a scream of pure instinct, a beacon of terror that sliced through Lysander's post-battle focus like a silver knife. He was halfway back to Stonehold, covered in the dust and grime of the Gorgon's throat, when it hit him. He didn't hear words. He felt the dark cloak, the grip of strange hands, saw the furious twist of Lady Anya's face, and tasted the cold, salt air of the northern cliffs. He didn't order a halt, he became the halt. His horse reared as he wrenched its head around, his own roar of fury echoing back from the stones. To Stonehold, now, the northern postern gate, every second is a death sentence. He abandoned his ghosts, riding ahead with a speed that bordered on suicidal. The bond was a live wire, pulling him toward her, but the terror in the signal was fading, smothered by distance and the cloak. It was being replaced by a cold, dulling dread. She was being taken to the cliffs for an accident. At the Citadel, chaos reigned. Cale had found Cedric trying to bribe a stable hand for a horse. The former treasurer was now in the dungeons, singing a desperate, revealing song to save his skin, implicating Anya in years of graft and the specific plot to discredit the king through a prolonged, costly war. But the news of Ilara's seizure and Lysander's frantic return turned that victory to ashes. Lysander didn't enter through the gates. He rode straight for the northern wall, the lowest and most treacherous section, overlooking a sheer drop to the jagged rocks below. He leaped from his saddle before the horse had stopped, scaling the rough stone like a creature possessed. He crested the wall just as two figures emerged from a shadowed postern door onto the narrow, windswept cliff path. He saw the guard first, then the cloaked figure struggling in his grip. And he saw Lady Anya pointing toward the path's most dangerous curve, where the guardrail had conveniently rotted through. Lysander moved. There was no challenge, no dramatic shout. He was simply there. His hand closed around the guard's throat before the man could turn. There was a sickening crunch, and the guard dropped, releasing Ilara, who stumbled back, tearing the cloak from her head. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Lysander, her face pale in the moonlight. Anya shrieked, backing away. You were supposed to be at the pass." "The pass is secure," Lysander snarled, not even looking at her, his eyes scanning Elara for injury. "Your Eastern Claw allies are dead. Cedric is in chains, singing your praises. And you—" He finally turned his gaze on Anya, and it was the look of a king passing a death sentence. "You laid hands on my mate." Anya's defiance crumpled into sheer panic. "She's a nobody, a tool. You're throwing away your kingdom for a feeling." "No," Elara said, her voice surprisingly steady. She stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Lysander, the bond between them a visible, humming energy in the cold air. "You're throwing away your life for silver. He's choosing a kingdom that isn't built on lies." Lysander didn't touch Anya, he simply called out, "Kale." The general emerged from the postern gate, soldiers at his back. "Sire, Lady Anya is charged with treason, conspiracy to murder the crown's consort, and corruption. Take her to the dungeons. Seize all her assets, her mines, her ledgers. Her bloodline is stripped of title and land." As Anya was dragged away, screaming curses, Lysander finally turned fully to Elara. The fury bled from him, replaced by a raw, shuddering fear. His hands came up to cradle her face, his thumbs wiping away a smudge of dirt. "Did they hurt you?" "No," she whispered, leaning into his touch. The bond sang, relief washing through them both in a dizzying wave. "You got my message." "You were my message," he breathed, pulling her into his arms, holding her as if the cliff itself might try to steal her away. "Always." The cleanup was swift and merciless. With Cedric's confession and the evidence pulled from Anya's private records, the full scale of the corruption was laid bare. It was a cancer that had spread for years, diverting funds, prolonging wars for profit, and poisoning the council's counsel. Lysander's justice was absolute. The conspirators were stripped of everything. Their wealth was reclaimed for the realm, their families exiled, their names struck from history. The council was dissolved and rebuilt from scratch. General Kale was appointed High Marshal. Vor took over internal security. Marlowe remained seneschal, her loyalty proven in the fire. And to the astonishment of all, Lysander named a new position, Royal Liaison and Head of Sanctuaries. The role was created for and filled by Elara. Her first official act was not in a throne room, but in the Great Hall, now cleared of its solstice finery. Before the assembled pack, the surviving council members and representatives from the allied packs who had witnessed the solstice drama, Lysander made a proclamation. "The Omega healer, Elara, saved your king's life. She uncovered a treason that would have bled this realm dry. She helped turn a certain ambush into a definitive victory, using the bond the moon goddess herself saw fit to forge. She is my fated mate, my equal in spirit and strength. From this day forward, she is your queen, not by my decree alone, but by right of deed. Let any who question her worth speak now." The silence was total, and then it was broken not by words, but by action. Old Alpha Borin, whose granddaughter was now recovering, stepped forward. He went to one knee, fist over his heart. "My loyalty to the queen," he declared. One by one, the others followed. The generals, the lords, the ambassadors, even those who had sneered at her saw the results. A stronger king, a bankrupted enemy, and a traitor's plot unraveled by the very wild Omega they despised. Respect, grudging or genuine, was given. Elara's reign did not begin with a grand coronation, but with healing. She turned a wing of the citadel into a public healing house, staffed by her and the citadel's doctors, open to any pack member. She used the reclaimed funds from Anya's mines to rebuild villages scorched by the border wars. She sat in on council meetings, her pragmatic, compassionate perspective balancing Lysander's strategic ruthlessness. She was not a silent queen, she was a repairing one. The bond between them deepened, settling from a frantic, electric tether into a constant, warm presence. It was a partnership. He taught her statecraft, she taught him to listen to the land, to the small voices of his people. He still had the nightmares of war, her presence in his mind, a gentle, healing light, was the only thing that could soothe them. She still dreamed of the forest. He was there with her, a steady, protective shadow at her side. One evening, 6 months after the cliff path, they stood on the same balcony where she'd first felt like a prisoner. The mountains were bathed in sunset, and the realm was at peace. The Eastern Claw, leaderless and broken, had sued for a lasting truce. The new council was functional, loyal. Stonehold was no longer just a fortress of war, it was becoming a center of healing and commerce. Ilara leaned back against Lysander's chest, his arms around her waist. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The simplicity of the cave, when I was just a healer and you were just a wounded wolf." He nuzzled her hair, inhaling her scent of vanilla and pine. "I was never just a wounded wolf, and you were never just a healer. The cave was where we began. This," he gestured to the thriving citadel, the peaceful valley below, "this is where we build, together." He turned her in his arms, his grey eyes serious. "There is one thing we have not formally done, one law of our people we have not observed, because I wanted it to be your choice, not the bond's demand, not a political necessity." He reached into his tunic and pulled out a simple, beautiful loop of polished obsidian and silver, etched with tiny, intertwining patterns of healing herbs and mountain peaks. "A mating band. Ilara, will you mate me? Not because a king commands it, but because you choose it." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. She had found a home, a purpose, and a love that was both destined and chosen. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." The mating ceremony was held under the full moon, not in the grand hall, but in the courtyard garden Ilara had planted. It was attended by pack members, villagers she'd healed, and true allies. They spoke their vows not just as king and queen, but as Lysander and Ilara. When the marks were placed, his a crown over crescent moon on her neck, hers a healing hand over mountain on his chest, the bond didn't just settle, it bloomed, a permanent, unbreakable fusion of their souls. In the weeks that followed, a final, surprising detail emerged from the reconciled archives. Marlowe brought them a faded, ancient scroll. It was a prophecy, long dismissed as myth, from the founding of the House of Stone. It spoke of a king of war who would bring the realm to the brink of ruin through steel and isolation. His salvation would come not from another warrior, but from a healer of the rootless wind, an unbonded Omega with no pack, who would mend his body, then his kingdom, and in doing so, awaken a bond that would usher in a long era of peace and growth. Lysander read it, then looked at Ilara, who was tending to a pot of moonbell flowers on the windowsill. The rootless wind, the wandering healer, the king who had known only war. "It seems," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "the universe had a script all along." Ilara laughed, the sound bright and clear. "I prefer our version, it had better dialogue." Their story rippled out beyond the northern realms, becoming legend. The wounded Alpha King and the Omega Healer who didn't know his name. A tale not just of romantic destiny, but of how true strength is sometimes found in compassion, and how the deepest bonds are forged in vulnerability, not just in power. Lysander ruled with a wiser, steadier hand. Ilara healed with the authority of a queen. And the realm, for the first time in centuries, knew true peace. But as the first snows of a new winter began to fall, a single sealed message arrived by mysterious courier, marked with a sigil none recognized, a closed fist holding a shattered crown. It was addressed only to Ilara. Inside was no threat, no demand, just 5 carefully inked words that would change everything once more. "The sickness has returned." The message was a ripple across the still waters of their hard-won peace. "The sickness has returned," a phrase that meant nothing to most and everything to those who remembered the old histories. It was a reminder that for Lysander and Ilara, destiny was not a single chapter, but an ongoing saga. Their story began with a wound in a river and a lie of anonymity. It became a testament to a radical idea, that the mightiest Alpha does not find his strength in further conquest, but in accepting care, that the softest Omega does not find her purpose in silent support, but in commanding respect through unshakable competence. They redefined the rules of their world. He learned that a king's true power is amplified by a partner's clarity, not diminished by it. She learned that a healer's calling could scale from a single body to an entire kingdom, and that love could be both a fated force and a daily choice. The imprint in the cave was the spark, but everything that followed, the political gauntlet, the exposed treason, the bonded strategy that saved an army, was the forge. It proved their bond was not a vulnerability to be exploited, but a new kind of weapon and a new kind of foundation. They were not just mates, they were a complete system, Where he was the unyielding mountain, she was the forest that softened its slopes and gave it life. Together, they became an ecosystem that could weather any storm. Yet the final, cryptic note is the ultimate lesson. Peace is not a permanent state. It is a vigilant, continuous creation. For a king who was once only war and a healer who was once only rootless, their greatest test may still lie ahead. A sickness that once decimated their kind is knocking at the door. But this time, the realm is not led by a solitary, war-weary king or defended by scattered, independent healers. It is protected by a united pair whose bond has already rewritten prophecies and shattered corrupt kingdoms. The story of the wounded Alpha King and the Omega Healer who didn't know his name is more than a romance. It's a blueprint, a map showing that the most powerful alliances are often born from unexpected collisions of worlds, that true leadership balances strength with healing, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you were always destined to rule beside. If you were captivated by this journey of fated bonds, political intrigue, and transformative power, do us a huge favor. Smash that like button, it helps more storytellers find this tale. Share this video with anyone who loves epic romance with teeth. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. Because the story isn't over. The sickness has returned, and the next chapter for the king and his healer queen promises to be their most challenging yet. Let us know in the comments, what do you think the sickness could be? Until next time, keep believing in the power of unexpected connections.